Welcome to Awesome Movie Year, the podcast where we take a look back at an awesome year for movies, which is every year. My name is Josh Bell, film critic and writer, and I am joined by my co-host.
I'm Jason Harris, filmmaker, comedian, and I got to tell you the truth. I never had sex with Armand Assante either.
Whole bunch of virgins here at this podcast because in this season of Awesome Movie Year, we've been talking about the films of 1980, and we are here now at my pick, which is the teen comedy Little Darlings, featuring a whole bunch of teen virgins trying to lose their virginities in a competition. So
right, there's only two virgins trying to lose their virginities in the competition.
That's true. There are a lot of virgins overall, but only two of them are in the competition. That is correct. Yes. So it's a movie that has what sounds like a very wacky 80s teen comedy premise. It's set at an all-girls summer camp, and the two main characters, played by Kristy McNichol and Tatum O'Neal, end up in this bet where they are competing to see who will be the first to lose their virginity. And it does have some wacky 80s summer camp comedy stuff. But from my perspective, at least, and the reason that I picked this film is I think this is a really sensitive, well-acted character drama. I mean, it's a comedy, but it has a lot of serious moments about coming of age, about what girls and teenagers in general deal with peer pressure and approaching having sex. And I just think this movie is fantastic and super underrated. So I feel like I have a recent history of saying things like this, and then Jason's response is, "What is wrong with you?" But hopefully I shared something that people liked on this episode.
I still wonder what's wrong with you, but not necessarily with your pick this time.
All right. Good to hear. Good to hear. Because I feel like this movie does have sort of a cult following now. A couple years ago, I wrote an article about it as a sort of an underrated gem, and I got some good responses. And it was a movie that was long unavailable. And now that it is available to stream, I feel like more people are discovering it. It was a moderate success when it was first released. It grossed $34.3 million worldwide on its budget of $5.3 million. And I think it was a high profile release. Kristy McNichol at the time was a massive star on the TV show Family, which is one of these shows that apparently was like a huge, huge hit and has been completely forgotten as far as I can tell. But prior to this film, Kristy McNichol had won 2 Emmys, both for Family, and Tatum O'Neal had won an Oscar for Paper Moon. They were both really, really big teen stars teaming up in this film.
Tatum O'Neal was the youngest person to ever win an Oscar at that point, and Kristy McNichol was the youngest person to ever win 2 Emmys. She had 2 by the time she was 17 there, Josh. So I want to just dispute one thing. I think in 1980, if you made a movie for 5.3, like a movie like this, and you got 30 and change back, that's a big hit.
Okay, yeah. So it was a pretty big hit, and certainly it was a highly anticipated film. And I think maybe after being a hit, and I know when I wrote about it, I feel like people of a certain age, maybe a little older than us, talked about having seen it a lot on TV, on like early HBO and stuff like that.
I remember it from the pay cable channels back in the day.
Right. But I think it then sort of disappeared for a bit and is slowly making its way back. But although it did well at the box office, critics did not like it. I tried really hard to find a positive review of this movie, and I'm sure it exists somewhere. But with the reviews that are accessible online that I was able to find, there was really very, very little in the way of anything positive. Siskel and Ebert gave it 2 thumbs down, although they did give it credit for some of the seriousness that I was talking about and the sensitivity, especially Roger Ebert more so, I think, than Gene Siskel. But they felt that didn't fit well together with the summer camp antics, and they didn't care for any of those at all. So Ebert, in his, maybe a little bit mixed review, he said, "The movie begins with inexperienced teenagers who have an uninformed, frivolous attitude towards sex. And it moves rather awkwardly through would-be comic scenes in which Tatum O'Neal and Kristy McNichol attempt to seduce their target males and win the bet. but the scenes in which they actually confront the realities of sex are handled so thoughtfully and tastefully that they almost seem to belong to another movie. That's possibly because Little Darlings really wants to be two movies at once. A fairly serious film about teenagers and sex, but also a box office winner like National Lampoon's Animal House or Meatballs. That's why we get awkwardly forced comedy like the food fight scene. And I think he's not wrong that it's trying to do both of those things. I just think it succeeds, and he obviously doesn't agree.
Yeah, I like the food fight scene. It was like, hey, look at the camaraderie we all share, and that's what you kind of want from these summer camp movies.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to get some of the little fun antics in order to build up the characters and their friendship and their camaraderie, like you're saying, before you get serious.
I went to a camp once, and there was a chef, a large African-American woman named Peggy. And if you told her food was bad that day, she would pick you up and stuff you in a garbage can.
Wow. I mean, you would think that would be a lesson that would be quickly learned by everyone. But also, like, even if the food is bad, I guess they're kids, so they don't have filters. But like, why would you just say to some poor underpaid summer camp cook, your food sucks?
I don't think, I mean, maybe it was as simple as like, hey, the potatoes were a little under, or this needed more salt. But anything you said would would end up with you. Result was the word I was looking for there, guys. 2 syllables. I got the first one in a garbage can.
So did you get stuffed in the garbage can?
Nah. I complain about my food professionally.
Yeah, I was going to say, this is the launch of Jason's career as a food writer and an expert back there in summer camp. So Ebert, I think, was probably the nicest to this film, although even the other negative reviews especially did single out Kristy McNichol for her strong performance. Gary Arnold in the Washington Post said, "Little Darlings, an unsavory little doodle about sex-obsessed teeny boppers, unfolds at a summer retreat for girls called Camp Little Wolf. Somewhere across a lake, the boys are stationed at Camp Tomahawk. Given the maddening prurience of the material, it would be more appropriate if everyone was billeted at Camp One Track Mind. One is left with the unpleasant impression that Little Darlings was animated by an idle longing to exploit its popular teenage co-stars for cheap thrills. The depictions are discreet, but the context is obstinately smutty." And I completely disagree. I feel like this movie is not exploitation at all. In fact, maybe even what could have been to its detriment, because audiences would have expected something raunchier and, more nudity or more smuttiness, as he describes it.
Yeah, more because there was no nudity in this thing. So it's interesting that he's like One Track Minds. Like, did he want like a few of the girls to be like, you guys, stop worrying about sex. The color war is coming up.
I mean, it sounds like he did. He spends quite a lot of that review seemingly offended at the idea of this movie that would show these teenage girls being fixated on sex, especially starring, Kristy McNichol and Tatum O'Neal, these big popular teenage actresses. Like, they're not allowed to do something like that.
I mean, Josh, even today we're dealing with people, and not even on a sexual level, but, people were upset that turning red dealt with menstruation, right? So there's always an audience that can't fathom talking about women, their bodily functions, or their desires, shall we say?
Yeah, absolutely. And you have to wonder, like, would Gary Arnold have said those same kinds of things if this was a movie about teenage boys that starred 2 of the big, male teenage stars of the time? And I kind of doubt that he would.
Yeah, like, why didn't he say that about Up the Creek or other teen sex comedies?
Yeah, Up the Creek. Can't wait for that episode coming up. And again, Frank Rich in Time Magazine also had a lot of nice things to say about Kristy McNichol, but overall thought that she was wasted in this film. He said, "Both girls deserve a better vehicle than Little Darlings. The film has an amusing premise. The 2 heroines race to see who can lose their virginity first. But director Ronald F. Maxwell, who has done superior TV work, settles for slogging his way through a threadbare script. Writers Kimi, Peck, and Dalene do not know how to sustain their story beyond the initial exposition. and they're not much better at writing characters. The film's tone is confused and predictable. Lame slapstick gags, including the inevitable food fight, sentimental bromides about love, and deadly serious, if inexplicit, sex scenes are thrown together without transitions. Even the heroine's slowly developing friendship is sketchily written. It seems to happen off-screen.
Yeah, I think those are fair criticisms, because I was like, wait, they're rivals, but now they're friends, but nothing really made them friends. I thought that was fair. And I did think, it wasn't the most smoothly edited in a story sense. It just seemed like, okay, here's a scene at a summer camp. Here's a scene at a summer camp, but one didn't necessarily connect to the next.
Yeah, I didn't have trouble with those transitions. I do think, if there's one thing that I would perhaps criticize, it is that there feels like maybe a beat or two missing in the development of the friendship between the two of them. They're clearly rivals at first, and then in a lot of the movie, they're just kind of separate. They're off doing their own things. They're each on their own missions to lose their virginity, and they don't interact that much. And then it comes back at the end with them becoming friends. And I think there's a really good scene of not only them, but basically all the other supporting character girls turning on Cinder, the mean girl who has engineered this whole situation. And that, I think, shows the bond amongst all of them. But yeah, the very end of the movie, where Angel, Kristy McNichol's character, declares to her mother that Tatum O'Neal's character is her best friend, it's like, I could have used maybe like one more bonding scene between the two of them. So,
yeah, like, you don't really have too many friends if she's your best friend based on what we've seen there.
I mean, although that is also true, part of the point is that neither of these girls really do have very many friends, and they're outcasts at the camp. And that's why they agree to go along with this prospect, because they both want to be able to fit in and want to make friends. But yeah, that is a bit missing there. I agree.
Good, Josh. I'm glad you can take one on the chin for this thing.
I can. I'm not saying that these, any of these movies that I pick are perfect, but I really like this. And it's a movie that I have liked more each time I saw it.
How many times have you seen it?
This was the third time I've seen it. So not like a huge amount or anything, but I'm, someone who doesn't really watch movies more than once. So anything that I've seen more than one time is, probably something that I'm interested in. But I first saw this movie really not knowing much about it or expecting much from it, because I was working on an article for a magazine, Jason, that both of us have written for, David Magazine, about summer camp movies, and was just looking for fairly well-known summer camp movies to kind of fill out this article, and thought that this looked kind of interesting. At the time, it was not available to watch anywhere, really. I watched a bootleg upload of a VHS tape on YouTube in order to see this movie the first time, and just was really so pleasantly surprised by it, because it wasn't what I expected. I thought it's going to be this raunchy teen comedy, just maybe with girls instead of guys as the main character. And then I watched it again to write that article a couple years ago, and again this time. And I just feel like this movie is so, like, the one thing I really disagree with what Frank Rich is saying there is about the writing of the characters. I feel like all the characters are really, really well drawn, including a lot of these small parts, just the other girls in the cabin. They feel like real people at this summer camp, even though they're all kind of based in little single personality traits. The kind of hippie girl played by Cynthia Nixon, and the nerdy one who's always reading and things like that. But they don't feel like they're just reduced to those. So to me, I find this movie really rewarding, and especially because of the sort of genre that it's in and the time period that it's from, that you wouldn't expect it to be like that at all.
Yeah. Okay. As a fan of those types of movies, I wouldn't have minded a little more levity to this thing, but that's okay.
Right. Yeah. So you had not seen this before?
No, I know the movie, and it's weird that it's been unavailable for so long, but I had never seen it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the unavailability had to do with the music rights primarily, I believe. And there's some pop songs that, for whatever reason, whether it was budget or something, they didn't fully lock down, home video rights and things like that. And even now, Jason, we were talking about this, before recording, that the version that you can rent now on various streaming services may not have all of the original songs in it. We're not entirely sure.
It feels like a mishmash to me, but I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think so too, because there's some songs in it, like Blondie's "One Way or Another," and there's the Bellamy Brothers song at the end. that are pretty well known that I think must be original, but at least on like Wikipedia, it mentions some of the music and it mentions the Cars, and I'm pretty sure that Cars song is not in the version that you can rent right now.
You said Virgin.
I did. Virgins are on my mind with this film. So, Dave, had you ever seen this one?
No, I hadn't. There's not a lot of summer camp movies, even though I went to a summer camp not too unlike this for like 6 years.
I feel like you're like the ideal candidate for a summer camp. Like,
yeah, I know, right? Yeah, I love just how authentic it all feels. To me, since I haven't seen a lot of summer camp movies, Wet Hot American Summer is like the gold standard. So this is, it's a good real one.
But Wet Hot is a gold standard because it really takes that genre and does such a good send up of it. So
yeah,
I'm sort of surprised because Dave, I know you're such a Wet Hot American Summer fan. I would assume that you would have familiarized yourself with this genre more.
I know, and I was surprised watching this how much feels like ripped right out of this. Like it felt like there's entire scenes that they're parodying.
Oh, from Wet Hot American Summer.
Probably
Yeah, that is quite possible. Even though this may be, when Wet Hot came out, this was probably a bit obscure, but I'm sure they had seen it when they're, writing that film.
What was the name of your summer camp, Dave?
Camp Akiba.
Was it a Jewish camp?
Yep, all Jewish, and it was right down the road from where they filmed Wet Hot.
Oh yeah,
I was at Camp Pinebrook. That's a good camp name.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Josh.
I never went to sleepaway camp.
I didn't go to sleepaway either. I did at that one that I told you about with the lady who stuffed you in the garbage can.
Right. Yeah. So no, I went to a day camp called Cali Camp. But I feel like day camp and sleepaway camp are very different kinds of experiences.
Well, yeah. I mean, well, yes and no. So like, cause I've done both. Like the Camp Pinebrook was a day camp, but it was like the very quintessential summer camp of like sports and hikes and, talent show and stuff like that. And then I think what you miss is like that kind of bonding, and campfire stuff, but I don't really need that.
Yeah. I mean, I had all those activities too at day camp, but I definitely feel like that sort of really serious bonding and having it be like your family is something that you don't. I mean, I went home every day, obviously, so it wasn't quite the same. I made friends, but I feel like not on that same kind of level that you see in movies about sleepaway camps. So,
Dave, what was your big focus at Camp Akiba?
Was it losing your virginity?
No, not at all. It was playing
Armand
Game Boy.
Assante?
Playing Game Boy?
Oh. Yeah, playing Game Boy. And I actually lost like 50 pounds one summer because I wouldn't walk up the hill to the mess hall to get food. I just sat in my room and just starved, basically, because I was so
horrifying,
lazy.
Dave.
Just playing video games.
Story.
That's hilarious. Good old Dave.
Jesus. Wow. Okay.
Hey, Josh, do you think, I mean, they probably are. We're just not in that world anymore. But obviously there was like a whole subgenre of movies about this in the 80s. So like, summer camps are hugely popular. Do you think that like summer camps and sleepaway camps are still as popular as when we were growing up?
I mean, maybe not as popular, but I'm pretty sure they do still exist just because there aren't a lot of movies about them. And they're, they're like identified with the 80s because there were those movies. And I reviewed a movie, I don't know, 6 months ago or something, a small independent film about kids at summer camp. And I feel like it was possibly set in the 80s. And if it wasn't set in the 80s, it definitely was trying to get that vibe going. And it was, they had to save the summer camp. And there was a whole like the boys versus the girls, like a color war kind of thing, Jason, that was going on. And Colin Mockery was the head of the camp.
Yeah, I got a fun story. I was asked when I had like a good minute as a hot writer to come up with a premise for Hot Tub Time Machine 2. And we pitched on that. There were 4 executives and each one got to pick a writing team. And Matt Dines picked us. And we were told we had the funniest pitch, but they liked a different angle better. The angle they went with was like, hey, they end up in like spring break in like the 90s or something like that.
And your idea was about a summer camp?
Yeah, my idea was they end up back at the same place that they end up in Hot Tub Time Machine, but it's summer. And now they're there at summer camp. And there's literally every trope that you could play with. Like the neighboring camp is getting, the owner's going to buy it and they're going to lose the spirit. And then, of course, they convince them like, well, we'll bet you we could beat you in color war. And the winner of the color war gets the camp. And we were told it was the funniest one. And we didn't sell it. And then these other guys sold theirs. And then Steve Pink decided to write his version. So none of it went anywhere anyway.
And it was so bad. the actual hot tub time machine too.
I think I liked I liked our summer camp version. I also like when I heard we lost to a spring break, I was like, no, that makes sense. But like, I like the idea of like, hey, we have this location. We've seen it in the winter. We've seen like all those like kind of tropes from like winter movies. Like, let's do the summer version of that.
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, but one thing I do like about Little Darlings is that it's not full of every one of those things. It's got the food fight and the whole central concept of the virginity competition, but it's not just like one cliche after another that you watch it thinking like, oh God, this is your basic summer camp movie. I feel like there's that good mix. So to bring it back to this movie that we're theoretically talking about.
And I would argue I like those things in summer camp movies.
Well, then we'll get into that a bit more when we come back and talk about our general thoughts on Little Darlings. Welcome back to Awesome Movie Year. In this episode of our season on the films of 1980, we are talking about my pick, which is Little Darlings. And so, Jason, as we mentioned, my insecurity over picking movies that you hate. You didn't hate this, though, right?
No, I didn't hate it. I don't know. Have I really hated that many that you've picked, Josh?
I don't know. Well, maybe the most recent one was Smiley Face, which I feel like that entire episode was just you looking at me like, what is wrong with you?
Yeah, I don't like that movie. But I was thinking because, like, there was that one you picked in 1984 with the ladies in the mall.
Night of the Comet. I love that movie. Yeah.
Yeah. And I didn't love that, but I was like, oh, that's cool. And I see how this fits. Look, we're all fans of like the coming of age story, and we all like strong female protagonists in our story. We've talked about like Never Going Back and stuff like that. Fort Tilden is, I guess, they're in their 20s, but I love, we love good movies like that. And so I totally could see why, Josh, you like went for this, why you gravitated for it. Some of it, like I said, didn't work for me, where it was like, here's how the characters are now interacting, where it's like, hey, like that rivalry wasn't much of a rivalry at all, and like you said, it's a rivalry for one scene or two scenes. And now we're apart for eight out of 10 scenes in the movie. And now we're having a food fight, and it's not mean, it's all love. And now we talk about who lost the virginity and who didn't, and now we're best friends. So like there were parts I didn't like, but again, it's a breezy 94-minute movie. I got no qualms with this one, Josh.
All right. Well, I'm glad to hear it. So, and I think that aspect is one thing that I liked, is that they don't really have a rivalry. They have one moment on the bus to camp where they kind of clash with each other just over who's sitting where or whatever, and it's minor. And then the Cinder character, who again is sort of this queen bee, or wants to be the queen bee, she's the one who sets herself up as the most mature. She's always wearing makeup, and she claims to be engaged to her boyfriend and very sexually experienced, and she appeared in a shampoo commercial, and she's clearly wants to be the girl that everyone else like looks up to / fears. And so she's the one who creates this rivalry, essentially. She engenders this as a way for herself to be like in charge of everyone and run this competition. And so I did like that it wasn't about these two girls actually hating each other. And which is why I didn't necessarily mind that they didn't have a lot of big scenes of like resolving that, because they didn't have some sort of huge antagonism. And I think it's also about that they kind of almost reluctantly agree to this bet at the beginning, and then they just get swept up in it because all the other girls in the camp are really into it, and they're wearing their shirts with the Angel and Ferris and different names on them, and they're constantly asking, how are things going and who is your, target or whatever. And so they almost have no choice but to follow through with this, even though they're clearly both very ambivalent about it.
Yeah. You had mentioned the supporting characters, Josh. My favorite was Chubby.
Yeah, it is unfortunate that that's the name that they give that character in the credits. And it's doubly unfortunate because it's not like that character just goes through the whole movie with people talking about how she's chubby. In fact, I don't recall mention any mention of that whatsoever. So it's weird. I mean, the trait that they keep mentioning about her is more that she's short or small, and everyone thinks she's a littler kid than she really is,
or that she's a kid who wants to be a grown-up type,
right?
She wants to be with the older girls, so
right. But she gets to be, so I assume it's authorized in some way. But yeah, she doesn't want to go be in the cabin with the 10-year-olds who are telling bedtime stories because they're so immature.
Did you guys have any weird nicknames in camp?
I don't think I did.
Yeah, I don't think I did either. No.
I had a friend in school who we called Mud. I don't even know why that was, but when I was introduced to him, it was like, this is Mud.
Oh, that's funny. I remember this, and now I just like rang the bell. We had a kid at Camp Pinebrook, and it was not a nickname. His last name, his name was Sean Tushyham, which is a horrible name to grow up with. And but hilarious looking back.
Yeah, I'm sure he doesn't feel that way. Let's get Sean Tushyham on the podcast and ask how traumatized he was by everything in his childhood.
I mean, like, if it was like, as a kid, you're going to make fun of Tushy or Ham, but like to put them together, that's really a double whammy, Tushyham.
That is super unfortunate. So, of course, Angel in this movie, her name is ironic, I guess she keeps saying, especially when she introduces
She's from
herself.
The streets.
She is from the streets, which did make me wonder, like, how does she afford to go to this summer camp? Because, they make a big deal about how she and her mother have this like rundown car, and she lives in, I mean, not like a housing project maybe, but certainly not a fancy or even like middle class kind of house, but she can go to summer camp for the whole summer. So I don't know about that.
Kristy McNichol's good, man. And, obviously was a very successful actor. And it's fun watching her at this stage of her career when she probably was at the zenith of her fame, right? And same with Tatum O'Neal, really.
Yeah, both of them. I mean, Kristy McNichol is so good in this movie. And I think she elevates the material if you think maybe the writing isn't always at a high level, especially in those emotional scenes between her and Randy, played by Matt Dillon, the camper from the boys' camp that she decides she's going to lose her virginity with. That's the stuff that like Roger Ebert is talking about, where it's so sensitively handled about this girl and her conflicting feelings about sex and whether she wants to do it and how she feels about it afterwards. And you believe every moment of that because Kristy McNichol is so good in this movie. And I remember after having seen this, I think maybe the second time when I wrote the article, and just thinking about how good she was, and I'd love to see more Kristy McNichol movies. And there's very little where the movie or even her performance seems to have a reputation of being particularly good.
Two Moon Junction?
Yeah, the erotic thriller starring Sherilyn Fenn, that she's not even the main character. I mean, maybe we'll talk more in the legacy, but she did make another movie right after this with Ronald Maxwell, who's this director, called The Night the Lights Went Out in Georgia, which is also seemingly unavailable, but doesn't sound like it's particularly good.
Which is shocking because it's based on a Vicki Lawrence song. So you would think
exactly.
If you're going to make a movie, make it based on a Vicki Lawrence song.
And there was like a famous monologue related to that from Designing Women, I think, which was recently talked about in Better Nate Than Ever, the Disney Plus original film. He gives a whole monologue, not related to this at all. But I mean, maybe Family. I'm not sure if Family, the TV series that she won Emmys for, is any good or is available to watch anywhere. But it sounds like that was maybe the best example of her skills as an actor. But yeah, both of them. I think Tatum O'Neal is good here too. She doesn't get as much of a range to work with. I mean, Ferris, her character, has some moments of sadness. She finds out her parents are getting divorced. And the scene between her and Gary, Armand Assante, when she is really trying to put the moves on him and he's just sort of bemused by all of it, you can feel her like desperation. And it's definitely a tough scene to watch at times.
Well, two things about that. One, she's a bit over the top, but also she's playing a girl who's like out of her, emotional maturity in that scene.
Oh, yeah, no, I agree. I'm saying that's what's good about it, that you can tell that the character is trying really hard and she really puts that forth.
Yeah. Kristy McNichol was the People's Choice Award for favorite young motion picture actress in like 81. So it was like right around this and Only When I Laughed, which was based on a Neil Simon play. Let's talk about Armand Assante, who's an interesting actor. He's good in this. Like, you're laughing, but I think he does a good job here.
Yeah, I know he's good in this. I think we just, maybe that's just me, but I think of him in his, much later years when he's one of those actors who has looked like an old man for like 30 years and just plays, mobsters and stuff like that.
Right.
So this was certainly a surprising role for me to see him as this hunky, sensitive teacher guy. But he is good. And I think that's a tough balance with that character. And certainly there are aspects of that storyline that would not fly in a movie today. But I think given how problematic it could have been, that it's handled really well. I mean, they acknowledge that he's, some guy in his 20s. And if a teenage girl was coming on to him, he probably would be into that, even though he knows he's not supposed to be into it. But he stops it before it goes past a point that would be inappropriate, even though it does go past a point that sort of now we would probably think was inappropriate.
Dave?
Jason, you don't want to weigh in on that at all?
Agreed.
I wanted to talk about Matt Dillon when we mentioned Wet Hot American Summer. Dave, did you not have flashbacks to Paul Rudd in Wet Hot? That's that type of character with
the cigarettes wrapped up in the sleeve, and
And I'm a big Matt Dillon fan. I honestly think he's underrated. I was looking; he's got some projects coming up, but I feel like when we look at McConaughey and Nicolas Cage, these guys having renaissances, like Matt Dillon, he could totally be the next one. He's so talented. But I like, I told you guys I watched The Outsiders not too long ago. I really like him in the brooding early 80s where he's like, I don't know what you want from me, man. He's like a young Brando. I don't even care about you. I'm just a guy.
That's good. Yeah. And he's very good at that. And I like that too, though. That character, you can tell that a lot of that is sort of his own affectation, that he has moments where he also drops that facade and has the sensitivity, and that he's probably just as nervous in his own way about having sex with Angel, even though he's not a virgin, or at least he says he's not. And I think we're meant to believe that he's not. And when she is vulnerable and starts crying, he kind of drops the macho bluster and is trying to relate to her and help her. But yet at the same time, he's still a horny teenage guy. And so he's easily able to move on if Cinder is coming on to him and tells him about the bet. And he's like, yeah, screw her. So I like the balance.
Well, wait a second. I got to give him, hey, look, from an emotional standpoint, if someone told you, hey, the only reason this person was interested with you was because of a bet, but I'm interested in you because of you would, of course, you would be hurt and want to move on. So he didn't do anything wrong there.
No, he didn't do anything wrong. And of course, being lied to about that being a bet that's what's wrong. But I think my point there is that it doesn't try to pretend that he's not a horny teenage boy and wants to have sex with hot girls. At one point, Angel says, don't you find me attractive or something? And he's like, all girls are attractive. Yeah. He's not picky.
I just came to summer camp to ride bikes with my buddies. And now you got me all mixed up inside.
Yeah, and he's not even good. There's the great scene too where Angel and one of the other girls are kind of spying on him as she's scoping him out to see if he's going to be her choice. And he's riding the dirt bikes and he's bad at it. He falls off. Everyone else is doing well. And he takes his helmet off in frustration and he's not the brightest.
He's a dreamboat, Josh.
He is a dreamboat.
There's a lot of posturing on both sides of the camp.
Exactly. He's got great hair too. His hair in this movie is just glorious.
Yep.
And give Matt Dillon credit, right? He was kind of that, that quintessential teen hunk who could have played that role over and over again. And he really, as an actor, did a lot of and does a lot of different things. I like that about him.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I like Matt Dillon, and I think it's a good performance because he gets you to understand those layers of the character. And this was one of his earliest roles. I think this is his third movie, maybe. So he's still just starting out. And, I noticed he doesn't even get billed in the opening credits. Armand Assante gets to be billed, but he doesn't. So, he was not a big deal at the time, certainly.
That's a bummer. Josh, tell us about or Dave, how the music plays into this whole thing.
Well, it's hard to say because, some of those songs may not be what they originally used, but the score is fine. It seems very typical late 70s, early 80s kind of stuff.
Typical.
What about Gary Callahan, Armand Assante singing his love ballad with his guitar about a cherry to these girls who are trying to lose their virginities?
I don't know what that song is, if that was a well-known song that he's playing there or whatever. I did like in that scene, it was funny that Chubby is sitting
singing
there singing the words along with some fake little microphone. And it's very subdued and subtle the way that they show that with her. So I feel like there's a lot of little details with that. And all the actresses playing those supporting roles, even in other, scenes where they're just in the background, they're always reacting in very real seeming ways, which I really enjoyed. And again, just the fact that you can really get the camaraderie of all of these girls and not just of the two main characters.
I really like Cynthia Nixon. I thought she was really fun.
She was as Sunshine, the hippie girl, and this was her first role, the first movie she was in. Yeah,
and when looking her up, I forgot she was in Amadeus, which we covered here. So
we did, yeah. She had a long career. I mean, starting as a child actor, and I think people know her more obviously for her adult roles, but
for running for mayor of New York City.
Hey,
Josh. So they had offered the Kristy McNichol part to Brooke Shields and Jodie Foster, and both would have been good. This is just at this time. There was as I told you, I've read that book, like The Ultimate History of the Teen Movie, and like this is like the 80s. That's the golden age, right, of teen movies, and and there's so much talent. So many talented young actors who were just coming up then. So one movie I was thinking about while watching this was Blockers, because I thought Blockers really handled a similar subject matter in a funnier way, but also like in a really effective way.
Yeah, I don't really like that movie, but I do agree that the sort of teen girl bonding in that film is done well. All the adult antics in that movie I find really annoying. Another movie I think we could agree that this recalls is one that we both like a lot, Banana Split, from a couple years ago, which is about two teen girls who should be rivals and then become friends. So I think there's definitely a lot of influence, and I'm sure there's more than just those two that have been influenced by this film, even if it was kind of not available to watch for a little while.
Well, Josh, do you want to rate this thing?
Yeah, should we rate it out of 5 broken condom machines or 5 food fights? Yeah,
sure. Broken condom machines, that's a fun scene where Chubby has to go in and get condoms and
then they steal the whole machine out of the gas station bathroom, and then they break it open like it's a piñata, get all these condoms out of it.
I give it 3, Josh. As I said, I don't love it. I don't hate it, but it was good. And that's cool with me. 3 right there for me. 3 broken condom machines.
I'll take it. I'm glad that you could, find some enjoyment in it. I'm giving it 4. Like I said, I feel like I've enjoyed and appreciated this movie more each time, and it's super underrated. And if more people watch it, you can rent it now on all the various places. Please check it out. So, Dave?
I'm going 3.5, right in the middle of you guys. Yeah, it's a fun movie.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Dave. I'm glad you found it that way.
Yes.
We'll come back in a moment and talk about the legacy of Little Darlings. Welcome back to Awesome Movie Year. In this episode of our season on the films of 1980, we have been talking about my pick, the summer camp comedy Little Darlings. And we've been mentioning throughout here, part of the legacy of this film is that it kind of disappeared for a while because of the music rights. It was hard to get. You would have to find it on VHS or like I did on like a, bootleg upload. But it's been more available recently. So I feel like more audiences are discovering it now and probably will continue to. And certainly that summer camp genre, Jason, as you're saying, is such a big deal that lots of people will be looking, I think, for those kinds of movies.
I want to watch the TV version of this movie, which sounds insane to me because it has no references to sex, sexual dialogue, or any of the scenes that involve. So is it like a 2-minute, is it just a commercial or what how do you make this movie?
Yeah, I mean, this is an edit for television where they remove the sexual references. So, it's just, this is all we have really going about this is like what Wikipedia says, that they make it as if it's a competition to make the guys fall in love with them. So I feel like you could probably get a good amount of even the interaction between them and the guys where it's just like them trying to get attention and whatever. But yeah, it must be very short. Maybe you throw commercials in it and it airs in a 1-hour time slot or something. I don't know. It's kind of crazy.
Have you ever seen Ronald F. Maxwell's film Kid Co. From 1984, where a bunch of kid entrepreneurs buy land that involves cow and horse manure, and they sell the manure as fertilizer? Kid Co.
No, I have not. And Ronald F. Maxwell, not exactly a distinguished career following this. That sounds kind of amazing. He also directed The Parent Trap 2, the sequel to the Haley Mills movie, which I'm pretty sure I have seen because that's the one where now Haley Mills's characters are adults and they get parent trapped. I think. And then there was like a whole series of those. I weirdly, for some reason, as a kid, watched all of the made-for-TV Parent Trap sequels, having never seen the original Parent Trap, and thus only knew the Haley Mills character as an adult version. So he directed that. And as I mentioned, he did team up immediately after this with Kristy McNichol again on The Lights Went Out in Georgia. The weirdest thing is that much later in his career, he became this director of Civil War movies, Gettysburg, Gods and Generals, Copperhead. The first two of those, which were fairly well known, I think. But that was the end of his career. He directed these three big Civil War epics, and his last credit was in 2013. So he's, I guess, basically just retired now.
Yeah, I think he was also teaching, but you would think he would get involved with like Yellowstone or 1883 and do something like that.
Yeah, that would fit there. But maybe he's had his career and he's happy, just maybe just teaching or being retired. So, Jason, the thing I thought you might be mentioning when you said the TV version of this, which is a TV pilot from 1982 that was made based on this film to try to turn this into a TV series that did not go anywhere. It's just a pilot. I was trying to see if it was available to watch, like, on YouTube or something, like we did with the 9 to 5 TV series, for example, but I could not find it. And it was written by Kimi, Peck, and Dalene Young, the writers of the film, directed by Joel Zwick, was the director of that pilot, starring Pamela Adlon as Angel and Tammy Lauren as Ferris. So it sounds like an interesting, I'm not sure how they made that. I assume they don't have the virginity competition, but just a
I'm a tough girl from the streets.
Right. Exactly.
I'm a rich girl, but you don't know who I am. So
yeah, I'm sure it's something like that. But I would have loved to see young Pamela Adlon as Angel. I think that would have been great.
Well, look, if we're going to talk about TV, Josh, I think both of us remember Tatum O'Neal from her work on Rescue Me not too long ago, right? She had a nice turn there as Tommy Gavin's sister. And of course, Kristy McNichol, Empty Nest.
Yes. Yeah, that
Dreyfus. Dreyfus. I'm a doctor. You're running all over the place, Dreyfus.
Oh, there's a Richard Mulligan? Is that
who was expecting a Richard Mulligan impression today?
No one, obviously. But yeah, I mean, Kristy McNichol, as we said, her attempt to become a movie star didn't really quite pan out. And so she had returned to TV and did Empty Nest for many, many years. And then eventually retired from acting. She's one of these people, it sounded like her experience as a child actor, really both her and Tatum O'Neal, had trouble dealing with this huge amount of fame as children. And so Kristy McNichol, eventually she retired from acting in 2001. She also, she came out as lesbian around that time, or maybe just before that. And, that was something that she, I think, was struggling with having to not reveal to people when she was younger. So seems like her life is probably better now that she's, away from the spotlight.
I think one of the reasons she left acting was because she's bipolar and like she had to focus on her mental health, and she says she's in a much better place. Tatum O'Neal had it rough, man. Like we all know the stories about Ryan O'Neal. There was Ryan and Tatum, the O'Neals, on the Oprah network, where they were trying to like mend the relationship between father and daughter. And that must have been tough to be the daughter of a star who was not only a huge star, but also a huge egomaniac and everything like that. So
she had drug problems, and she, not long after this movie kind of more or less disappeared from the spotlight, had very few credits, and later in the 80s and in the 90s, and then kind of came back with stuff like Rescue Me, like you were saying, back in the 2000s.
Yeah, as a sports fan, I knew she was John McEnroe's ex-wife, but it was fun to read about how she was Michael Jackson's girlfriend back in the day.
Yeah, all sorts of weird stuff going on in her life. She's written 2 memoirs. I'm sure there's all sorts of crazy celebrity gossip and stories in there. And she seems to have settled into this kind of small scale career, working in some,
probably
TV
better
stuff.
For her.
Yeah, and B movies. I mean, some questionable credits. She was in the third God's Not Dead movie, and in some B horror movie recently, which I don't know anything about, but I just love that the title of it was Rock, Paper, Dead. So you can't go wrong with that title.
Kristy McNichol smoked for 10 years because she had to smoke in this movie, so she got hooked on it.
Oh, that's unfortunate. Yeah, that is something in this movie too. The teenagers are smoking and drinking, and there's very little adult supervision going on at this camp, it seems like.
And she had auditioned for Amanda Wurlitzer in The Bad News Bears, who was played by Tatum O'Neal.
Tatum O'Neal, yeah. Well, I mean, they were clearly sort of on the same level as teen girl stars at the time that this movie came out.
Yeah. So as a teen star, we've already mentioned Matt Dillon, Outsiders, Rumblefish, Flamingo Kid, and then he kind of moved into the adult roles in the late 80s with Drugstore Cowboy and Singles. And he's just had a lot of big, To Die For, In and Out, Something About Mary. Like, there's a lot of big movies. Josh loves Crash. I like Wild Things,
Oh, I love Wild Things. I'm a huge fan of Wild Things. I was going to say, if we get to 98 or whatever, that'll probably end up being my pick.
Yeah, nice. That's a fun movie. So he's got 3 projects, I think, now coming up. American Dreamer with Peter Dinklage, which is an interesting movie based on an NPR story about like someone who's bequeathed a house and doesn't realize like all the problems that'll come with it. Asteroid City, the new Wes Anderson one we've talked about before. And then High Desert, which is going to be a limited series about like, someone's relative gets murdered and they've decided to become a private eye. So I'm just happy he's doing a lot. He did win the lead for Independent Spirit Award for Drugstore Cowboy. And Josh, you personally voted him as the best supporting actor in the Las Vegas Film Critics Society Awards for Crash.
Oof, I might have been in the Film Critics Society at that time, and I would have strongly objected to that award. But generally, I agree with you. I think Matt Dillon is really talented, and he's also someone who's willing to be adventurous with his choices and work with people like Lars von Trier, in addition to those more mainstream roles that he does. So absolutely very talented and underrated actor. We talked about Armand Assante, and you look at Armand Asante's credits for the last 20 years, and it's like literally no movie that you would ever have heard of, but just a ton of them.
I love him in Fatal Instinct. I'll tell you that much.
Oh my God. Is that the parody of Basic Instinct?
Yeah.
It's so good.
Oh, he does have an Emmy for Gotti. He's in Private Benjamin, Judge Dredd. So those are, and I think he got an Oscar nod for Q&A. So
okay. Yeah. See, I haven't seen any of that stuff. And I mean, hopefully his Gotti, that's like a miniseries, I think, if it's better than the John Travolta one recently.
That was a big HBO miniseries, and then he played Gotti, and then he played Odysseus in the Odyssey. So.
Sure, he's versatile. He can do both of those things.
Yeah.
Cynthia Nixon of all these people might have gone on to be one of the biggest stars here, of course, with Sex and the City and the recent revival of it, and Jason's fandom for her campaign for mayor of New York City. So
Cynthia Nixon it just felt to me like that Cynthia Nixon loves to hear the name Cynthia Nixon for a little
maybe so. She is very good in this movie and very like fresh-faced and innocent, in her first role.
Yeah. I wanted to mention isn't she the wife when we talked about Altman, we talked about Tanner 88. I think she's the wife in Tanner 88.
Okay, yeah, I haven't seen Tanner 88. She's on The Gilded Age right now on HBO, which is a fun show, and maybe better to watch than the revival of Sex and the City.
I haven't watched it. Have you? Either one.
I've watched The Gilded Age. Yeah, I like The Gilded Age. So, Dave, did you watch And Just Like That?
I did. Yeah, we watched that, and it's got its moments.
Okay. You're terrible, right. Dave.
Yeah, whatever. Krista Errickson, who is really like the third most important female character in this film, playing Cinder, the mean girl. She worked in the 80s and 90s as a young actor in some TV roles and stuff, and then quit acting to become a journalist and a documentary filmmaker. Seemed to have kind of an interesting career there, international journalism and stuff like that, and not what you would expect from Cinder.
She's good as the heavy in this one.
She is definitely, you hate her, but you also understand her own like insecurities and why she would be making this happen.
Any word on Chubby?
You know what? I didn't look up Chubby. I don't remember who that actress was, but
Abby Bluestone.
There you go. Hopefully poor Abby Bluestone was not traumatized by being credited as chubby in this film and, went on to a happy and productive life. So, But you know who did not go on to a happy and productive life?
What a segue.
I know. Thank you.
Amazing.
Thank you. So, I looked up the writers, and Dalene Young was a working writer. I think what happened with this film is I think it was Kimi Peck was the original screenwriter, and then Dalene Young came in and rewrote. And she was obviously a working writer on a lot of projects. She has a lot of like TV movie credits through, I think, 2002. But Kimi Peck, the only other like IMDb credit she has is the TV pilot version of Little Darling. So I thought, oh, what is she up to? Maybe she's doing some cool stuff. I'll Google Kimi Peck. That was a mistake. So Kimi Peck, if you Google her, virtually every article about her is how she is a notorious animal hoarder and had been arrested for animal cruelty. And there's like websites about like, watch out for her, and she's evading the authorities and all of this just really awful stuff. It sounds like she's had this very tragic life. And after this, she was unable to get, any other projects going. She went and worked as a writer and director of porn films and then became an animal hoarder. So really just a terrible thing for me to have learned about.
Do you have a favorite of her porn films?
I didn't even write down the titles, but I'm sure they're not as good as Little Darlings.
I was making light, but of course, everything you said is just horrifying. Like, not the porn stuff. I don't care. Do whatever you want, but like the animal abuse, not okay. We here at Awesome Movie Year are against animal abuse.
Yes, and it sounded like she just had a lot of mental issues. She was, drifting through different marriages and had children that she had given up for adoption. And it just, everything that I read about her made her life sound sadder. So I will try to forget that I learned that and just enjoy her lovely writing in this film.
And that's a great place to end this episode.
Let's do that on such a happy note. That is Little Darlings, and that is this episode of Awesome Movie Year. Check us out on social media.
Yes, you can check us out on social media. I'm Jason Harris Comedy, or J Harris Comedy, on all of the socials. My website, goforjason.com, is in a summer camp in the 80s somewhere. We're at awesomemovieyear.com. If you like an RSS feed, we got one for you. Awesome Movie Year on Facebook and Instagram. Awesome Movie Pod on Twitter.
You can go to joshbellhateseverything.com and find something that I wrote about the first time I saw this film. So that's exciting. And other random stuff there. Josh Bell Hates Everything on Facebook and at Signal Bleed on Twitter. And listen to our producer, David Rosen's awesome podcast, Piecing It Together.
Check out Piecing It Together wherever you listen to podcasts, and follow us on social media at Piecing Pod.
So, Jason, what do we have in our next episode?
Josh, we've covered a lot of major foreign filmmakers, but we have yet to get to Francois Truffaut. Well, that all changes with our next episode, The Last Metro.
So tune in next time for The Last Metro, and thanks for listening to Awesome Movie Year.
Thank you for listening to Awesome Movie Year. Make sure to follow Awesome Movie Year on Facebook, at Awesome Movie Pod on Twitter, and at Awesome Movie Year on Instagram. And if you like the show, review us and rate us with 5 stars on Apple Podcasts.
An All Points West production, produced by David Rosen in Las Vegas.
Sorry, did you have something else you were trying to say there, Jason?
I was just going to make a off-color comment about Dave. So
just more insults, that's all.